very good. Hello, I'm indeed Veerle Spaepen. I work as a researcher for the Thomas More University of Applied Science. And I want to talk to you about a research program that we are starting up on the acceptance of circular fashion with consumers. For a term that only emerged in 2014, circular has rapidly become one of fashion's most embraced sustainability concepts. And with interest in the term circular fashion doubling since then, according to Google Trends, it is interesting to see what this means for the fashion industry, more specific for the Flemish fashion scene. So at Thomas More, we kicked off a deep dive research program on the Flemish circular fashion market to find out how SMEs and startups are taking action and how the market is responding to it. Our full program is called Size Zero Waste and will last, hopefully, until 2024. We are working on it with 6 researchers who are experts in statistics, business, and communication, and we'll roll it out in co-creation with around 20 SMEs and startups. So why is there a need to investigate this circular fashion market? SMEs and startups are willing to take steps forward towards a more sustainable business, but are often confused by the mixed messages they get. We are told that consumers believe their choices can positively impact the planet, that a large part of consumers avoid buying products from brands that perform poorly on environmental practices. But on the other hand, that consumers struggle to change their behavior because of take-making dispose mentality they're used to. So for our SMEs in Flanders, we want to know whether sustainability questions are indeed changing consumers' buying habits. Consumers are taking real circular economy related actions like renting clothing. And if so, what can companies do to align their circular economy practices to meet these consumers' changing demands? Our full program consists of 3 pillars. First off, consumer willingness to participate, very important. It starts with addressing what is standing in the way of widespread consumer adoption. Brands need to understand what motivates the different consumer segments, including those who don't base their buying decisions on environmental factors. Second is communication. Consumers get their information from many sources, from advertising to social media to word of mouth. And the content and format will resonate differently with each person depending on their own context. It is a critical focus point for any organization attempting to encourage circular consumption. And third, business consists of the development of a return on investment calculator for rental by subscription, and re-commerce. Maybe you know all of this. It's a graphic, a short zoom in on circular fashion, and it tells us there are 5 stages where you can take action. You can design with sustainability and circularity in mind. You can produce more cleanly, sustainably, or you can keep in use for longer. This includes not just in creating long-lasting clothing, but also rethinking ownership through resale, sharing, rental models, and redesigning and reworking existing products, such as adding value through upcycling. Fourth, recycle easily back into raw inputs. Fifth, return any waste to nature easily, quickly, and safely. Most of the attention has focused on how production can become circular via innovative business models, products, and processes. However, the lack of demand for such offerings, perceived and real, has been highlighted in research as a significant barrier to move forwards towards a more circular fashion industry. That's why we zoom in on the use phase, because we believe complementary consumer behavior is needed to eventually close the loop. In order for this engagement to take place, to take action, we come across different drivers and barriers. What are factors which may influence acceptance and adoption of circular products and services? And can they be influenced by the right communication or nudging? Today, I will talk about our first of many steps. It's the survey called Mode Monitor or Flemish fashion monitor, if you want. It was an online survey about sustainable purchasing behavior and future intentions, the meaning of clothing and attitudes towards sustainable business models for clothing in the region of Flanders. We have taken it from 2020 until 2021. The purpose, with this survey, we wanted to answer three main questions. What is the position of the different consumer segments regarding sustainability in general? What are drivers and barriers regarding purchasing sustainable fashion and participating in circular fashion business models? And which communication strategies are appropriate for each consumer segment? Methodological, it consists of quantitative research, cross-sectional design. We collected 1,740 respondents, consisted of 75% female, 25% male. It is built up by 9 building blocks. I'm not going to read them all, but those are the 9 sections we sent out. We're showing you some of our first results today on general consumption behavior, knowledge, buying behavior, and willingness to try new business model. In a follow-up, we will work towards a cluster analysis, but for today, we stick to generational differences, which are very real, by the way. Generation Z is 25 or younger. Millennials are 26 until 44. Generation X, 45 until 56. Baby boomers, 57 until 74. In the section of general consumption behavior, we focus on the perception of one's own impact on environmental challenges, the involvement and concern with climate change, and the degree of sustainable lifestyle and future intentions. We see great concern for the environment among all respondents. 86% is concerned in a way, with a higher educated female as an absolute frontrunner. However, the concern is not always put into action. Generation Z is the most pessimistic in the power of their individual actions, where the following generations have a stronger belief that every action counts. We learn that older generations feel quite satisfied with how they are living a sustainable life, but when we ask what they do, most mentioned actions are sorting waste, not throwing away that much, using public transport. So doing great, but on the consumption side, there is still some work to do with all of them. Many of the respondents, mostly Generation Z, let go of this concern while making a purchase. On the bright side, where Generation Z is stating they are not engaging in a sustainable lifestyle just yet, they show the most ambition to make a change in the future on that matter. It would be interesting to see if they will up to these good intentions in the future. Knowledge and responsibility questions are about awareness of the environmental impact of the clothing industry. How should efforts be distributed, dissemination of information, and importance of eco-labels? I'm not showing you every number we have, but I show you a few. Awareness. An interesting number you cannot see in this graphic is that the degree of knowledge on the subject varies greatly within Generation Z. 1 in 4 is very much not aware of the fact that the fashion industry has a devastating environmental impact. This seems a bit contradictory with the marches for climate we see, but we must keep in mind that Generation Z is a self-educating generation. The internet is their go-to channel for education, and with AI ruling the internet, you can easily never come across the topic. Also, we should make a difference in awareness on climate change and the awareness of the role that our clothing industry is playing a part in it. Most people find it obvious that companies take the lead in making a change. Our respondents are not so much looking at themselves to make that change. It raises a question, maybe one action will not make a difference in the whole climate change issue, but with every dollar spent, you can make a company make a change. Where older generations rely on television for information, In younger generations, it's social media the go-to channel for information and education. We see a lot of people turning to TikTok and Instagram for uh, knowledge building. 80% of the respondents look at the media for information. Media should report more on environmental impact of the apparel industry and what needs to be done to reduce that impact. 67% is in need of more information at time of purchase. And then it's mostly Generation X and the baby boomers. The section of buying behavior contains question of necessity or impulse buying, types of store you're going to, sustainable clothing purchases, end of life, and drivers and barriers. Not surprisingly, Generation X is the biggest spender, and even more so when they have children. Everything considered about this generation, it is in fact an interesting buying group with potential to go green. Where we see that Generation Z, as we expect, buy a lot on impulse, Generation X buys mostly only what they need. Add that to the fact that price is less of an issue with this group, you have a group that shows conscious consumption behavior. More than 50% surveyed still buy cheap mass-produced goods, so-called fast fashion. We see that percentage diminish when growing older. Disposal. After use, we see a lot of clothing items remaining in our closets. The next logical step seems to be bringing them to the clothing bins. And we see Generation Z and millennials growing interesting in valorizing their clothing by selling them online. Donation is also attractive. On a side note, this is interesting on another level too, because for resale, putting clothes in a clothing bin or donating them to friends, consumers state active behavior. It's not doing nothing. So it would be interesting to look if we can tweak this already active behavior for setting up better, more local take-back schemes, for example. Since reuse of clothing is one of the most sustainable options, it is definitely worth further investigation. These graphics, I admit, are not very easy to grasp, but I wanted to show you the significant difference between generations. This shows the Z-score, which is the deviation from the norm or the average answer of the respondents. Mostly what we can see here is that the younger consumers tend to look at price and convenience aspects and are far less interested in production-related factors such as environmental impact, working conditions, country of origin, or pragmatic issues such as quality, materials, or comfort. For Generation X and baby boomers, it is in fact the other way around. Here can you see it more clearly? The younger generations are on the left side of the norm regarding production-related items, while you see here the older generations on the right side when it comes to quality, origin, materials, etc. So it's a different approach that you have to take to convince to go with your product. The contrast is a beautiful graphic. Awareness and willingness to try sustainable business models. Good news, 77 of the respondents is willing to buy the sustainable line from a fashion brand when offered. In the follow-up, it will be interesting to compare this stated behavior with real behavior in co-creation with real data from the sector to find out if the stated behavior is the same as a real, because normally we see a gap. But nevertheless, the intentions are there together with the willingness to pay a little bit extra. Barriers for Generation Z are always price related and not so much information or trust related as with the other generation. They just don't want to spend too much time looking for what is sustainable garment and what not, which fits in, of course, with their fast fashion preferences. Baby boomers would be significantly helped making choices when they get more information at point of sale in store. Prices are far less an issue for them. When we ask to try new business models, we see that there is a significant interest in the resale business model. especially with Generation Z and millennials. They also show willingness to participate in take-back services. In case of renting, the idea of renting one-off is appealing. However, renting on a subscription base, for example, a clothing library, seems a bridge too far. It seems for them very difficult to let go the idea of ownership. Alongside, it seems a hassle. It's other behavior than we are used to. Furthermore, it's a question of hygiene, uncertainty, and familiarity with the concept. And respondents would even rather borrow from friends than from a clothing library. And of course, competition with cheap clothing is not to be forgotten. For secondhand, we see other barriers, also the preparation or satisfaction of buying new clothes, hygiene as well, but not finding what you need, especially for the older generations who is buying more out of necessity than Generation Z or millennials. What we did next is clustering these numbers per generation. I have brought some first conclusions with me for Generation Z, but I can put them up later or talk to you about them in the questions. So I'm going to skip some. For millennials, we have put out, they are doing as much as I can. It's the baseline for that generation. Also, we see some eco-tiredness. For Generation X, we find there is a lot of untapped potential, but harder to reach. And for baby boomers, it's even harder to reach. Maybe we should set up more in-store actions to reach those generations. Next, the goal from the research programs are threefold. First of all, we want to work to business case analysis, where we combine the ROE model with the consumer segments to provide startups and SMEs in helping their business case make more. I'm lost for words. To make it possible to analyze new business cases founded in Flanders. Here we go. On communication, further research is lining up together with two pilots based on some of our insights, namely, how is TikTok and Generation Z working together? Can we use TikTok in bringing our sustainability message? Maybe an in-store experiment on sustainability information for more classic retailers aiming on Generation X customers. We will also work towards some policy recommendations during the program. Our full report is coming out in January. If you're an SME or a startup that is willing to participate in this investigation, please contact us. Or if you just want more numbers or more information, please contact me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veerle. So after the two presentations coming up now, we will get back to Veerle as well with questions, and then maybe you can dive a bit deeper in the results for all these generations. So the next speaker is Soraya Wancour. She is the Ghent-based designer and entrepreneur behind Studio AMA, with a paper focused on her startup called Studio AMA is Breaking the Economic System by Creating New Local Value Chain based on circular principles through the social economy. And I think you want to use this mic. You want to walk around a bit? Perfect.
Thank you for the introduction, Rozanne. It's a very long title, I now hear. It's a complicated thing as well, so sometimes you need your title, right? So yeah, that's it. Breaking the economic system with a fashion label, an inside job, because I am a fashion designer. I even am the descendant of a tailor in Ghent, as you can see, where clothing was made in an atelier in the back of a house, and where people passed their important moments in life, getting married, having children. Then you go and have a new costume, and that's not even that long ago, because it's only 2 generations, and now I am here talking about this. I am a doer, I am a maker, and yet I am talking about a paper. So this is a very contradictive environment for me, and I hope to take you with me in my story. I studied fashion at La Cambre in Brussels, and there you make your own univers, there you make your own truths and your own world. And then you end up in the industry. I worked high-end here in Antwerp with fashion designers, and I also worked low-end mass production in children's and babies confection and in the textile industry. This is a very ugly slide telling you that also fashion industry is very ugly. That's why. Yeah. This is how fashion looks like in the back. This is the Rana Plaza. You probably all have seen this. At our site, it looks like this. And after a while, it looks like this. And this is how we are now handling fashion. And that was, for me, a very hard confrontation. And then it was time for me to ask myself a question. How, as a designer, can I make up the best clothing industry possible? Still, until today, it's now 4 years. This is my question. And it's also my driver, because the more I dive deep into this topic, the more I feel the urgency to continue. So I went a bit back to when I was a student. There was a company in Henzen, where I'm from, who handed me their garbage mainly. In every production process, there is leftovers, and they helped me with having the possibility to check what they had left before it was picked up to go to a big oven where it's called thermic recycling. That's just burning things, so I could take some of the textiles there, and it's always at that point already broke my heart to not be able to take everything. So I went back there. This is not Libert, the one I was talking about first, but this is Bekert Desley. I mainly work with their loom states. Those are the tests of designers they draw on their screens, and then they are knitting a few meters, and then they check it, and afterwards it's already discarded. But those are super interesting fabrics, and it's my job to see the value in what we have and what is surrounding us, and I definitely saw the value in these fabrics. Now, it's not only the mattress thickening I work with anymore. It's mostly post-production, so partnerships with local textile industry. I also work with towels, Clarisse, and with linen from Libeco, and even interior textiles from Annabelle in Mariakerke. It's so funny. And also, I have a new capsule where I am turning shirts around to make new women's clothing. And the main thing in this is that I won't hide the origin of the fabric. I really want to use the story of this fabric into the design, because I believe that there is a connection between what you have and your own story, that you will value it more, because sustainability is also in how you approach what you have. This is the team who is making the clothes. It is a social sheltered workshop in Eke Nazareth, and it's called Zonnehoeve. And I can go there by bike, which means that I don't, because normally I take a lot with me. But it's very close. I'm there very often. And this is a very important partnership for me, because the designs that I make are made to suit what those people can handle. So for me, I know them, I know what they are capable of, and I will design accordingly to what is necessary for them. And I'm very proud of that. So it's mainly not, as we said this morning, it's not about technology, it's about communication, it's about connection, it's about seeing opportunities. And I think that's my playground, and that's where creativity comes in. And I really try to make the best business case possible within within this focus of circularity, using materials that are already existing and working together in a very close partnership with a local sheltered workshop where inclusivity is key. I try to tell this story as transparent as possible, as I do today, but also in hangtags, social media. This is what I do basically. The design is, and the connection between all those partners makes it possible to have this super local, hyper low tech clothing. And it's important to show you pictures. I'll just show some here. You have shorts and tops made from towels. The skirt you see is made from shirts. This is also a piece made of shirts where I will deconstruct pieces and I will see the value of this shirt, how you have the double layered color, which is very good because it's stronger, but you can use those specific value on another piece on the body. So that's the main rules of my design practice. And here you can see it a bit clearer. And I have also the graphic approach of how a shirt looks like. You can see it back here. This is linen. The pieces of the fabric that I have are rather small. So this means that often I have to make, I have to use two pieces to make one piece. And that's also, I won't discard them, and I will turn this into a design plus. These are two outfits made of mattress thickening. Also the dress I'm wearing is one of those pieces. Yes, this means there is a lot of research. Often we make a lot of tests, and it is learning by doing, and it is not the basic design approach, because normally I'm taught if you want to make a t-shirt, draw a t-shirt, search for the fabric for the t-shirt, and then search for a producer who can make the t-shirt. This is not how I work. It's completely the opposite, which means that I have to design my own way of working, but it's super interesting. So yes, I am trying to tell this story as good as possible, because I also want to, this is a very small scale thing, but also I want to influence the industry by setting an example, by showing that it's possible to have a different approach, and also in that way to pave the way for others and to show that it's possible. I think that's the most important thing. I do this also with video material. You can all look it up. I do my very best on social media. And I think this is indeed the tip of the iceberg. And I'm very happy to talk to you about this today. And I'm very open for a conversation and questions after, of course. There is, when talking about this tip of the iceberg, yes, the collection today is still small. And I am now searching for ways to scale the impact that I am making. And I am now in a moment that I am researching the different pots that I have there. One of them is selling through retailers. Now I do everything in short chain, so directly. But retailers are used to that they can buy in big quantities, but I can't sell them 20 of the same shirts, because after the first or the second shirt, the fabric is not there anymore. So also I can go through white labels, so lending the value chain to other fashion companies who want to have circular capsules. Also by even being more loud about the possibilities local in social economy with existing materials. And I am building my next dream project, which is the Studio AMA HQ, where I want to show what is possible within all these generations where they are buying their clothes. So I am obtaining a collaboration where where I'd like to have this now a lot of shops are empty. So I'm trying to convince one of those owners to give me some playgrounds, and I would like to really show this transparent value chain to everybody who is walking by. So having a shop in the front, and then having the social economy workers in the back, and then having the atelier in the middle. So by distributing this information next to Zara or COS, it will be really strange because you won't know all this information with the neighbors. So it's also trying to bring this ethical fashion into a new normal. And I think that if we want to bring a more responsible way of consuming to our streets, to our commercial hearts of cities, that we just have to do it. And so a big part of my job is also convincing. So anyone who could help me a hand with this big plan, which is it seems small, but it's about very big investments. I am open for all your ideas. Voilà. And so in short, I want to make fashion for people instead of fashion by people. This industry is on the back of a lot of women. We heard this in previous talks this morning. I want to make a fashion that has a positive impact for everyone involved. And that's just one word that is changed. But I think this is the mindset we need. And it's just a very simple question that we all can ask ourselves with every question there is this for people or by people? This is the impact of the fashion cycle. Today, this is what I am trying out also today. And I want to change by doing and inspiring by pioneering. I thank you very much. I hope that you see the value in what is surrounding you. It's not always new tech. And by communication, imagination, and design, we can do so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soraya. I will invite the third speaker onto the podium, Ben Hagenaars. Thank you for being here. Happy that you have arrived. You are of the LUCA School of Arts in Brussels, speaking about custom territory, a new modular sneaker model. I will give the clicker to you. Do you want to speak with this microphone or with this one?
This is fine. Maybe just some help.
Okay, good. That's not me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to this presentation. So thank you for the introduction. I will present a case study that we conducted last year. It's called Custom Territory. And as you can probably guess, it's about shoes and the shoe industry. We present the Custom Territory as a collective of shoemakers, designers, and wearers. That's quite important because we're exploring how we can blur the boundaries that exist between those different actors. The project, or the idea of the project, actually emerged in one of my design courses, which I teach at the LUCA School of Arts at the product design department in Ghent. These are some students of mine. Actually, I should say ex-students of mine, because I now work within the fashion industry. Better in the middle is now the lead designer of Rombout in Paris. But he's also part of the Custom Territory collective, along with these guys. And they, in this course that I teach around circular design, they came up with this idea of doing something with shoes. And I thought that was an interesting idea, and we built a complete project around that, involving various actors. But let's say the goal of the project is to decentralize the global shoe industry into local territories where the loop between designing, making, and wearing can be closed. It aims to make a contrast with how the shoe industry is organized right now, and especially the sneaker industry. Is a system that is organized on a global scale. It is organized in a linear way, and the design process is organized quite exclusive. Global means resources come from all over the world. Production is organized all over the world, linear. It produces a lot of waste. And exclusive, the distance, literally, between design, making, and wearing is really big. Which makes it really hard to set up collaborations and to create a dynamic between designers, makers, and wearers. So in contrast with this global system, custom territory aims to develop a local, circular, and inclusive design process. Of course, the challenge is not to formulate that idea. A lot of you will agree that a local, circular, and custom system is interesting. The challenge is, of course, facilitating a transition from a, let's say, global industry to a more decentralized production system. So we developed several actions or strategies to make the start a journey in that transition. So one of the first things that we developed is a manifest, a design methodology that follows a retake, remake, reuse pattern. And one of the first actions that we did to communicate that idea was not to develop new products, but to recreate a scenario. Literally, we developed a film that follows 3 actions: retake, remake, reuse. Retake is about resourcing locally available resources. Remake is transforming those resources into new shoes. And reuse is repurposing those products. So these split screens that you see right here are video stills from a film that we developed. They are presented in the academe, in the exhibition space, which you can see probably later. But they are continuously looped and are kind of a manifest of the custom territory design principles. But in order to develop the film and the scenography and the costumes for the film, we followed our own retake, remake, reuse principles. So we developed a production system that follows the same pattern. It looks like this. It starts from sourcing locally available resources that can be post-consumer waste and industrial offcuts, like rubber offcuts. It separates existing shoes or worn-out shoes, the uppers from the soles, which are the parts of the shoe that are worn down. We developed our own lasts that we used to rebuild the shoe, and we learned that in collaboration with our partner Ambiorix, which is actually the last shoe manufacturer that is active in Belgium. They work in Tongeren. You see a picture of us in the assembly line in Tongeren. They have a completely operational assembly line. But at the same time, that we notice that this knowledge is slowly disappearing. The fact that this is the last shoe manufacturer in Belgium tells also something about the shoe industry that has almost no room in a country like Belgium anymore. But what was super inspiring is the collaboration that we did. So we learned a lot of classical shoe manufacturing techniques, and applied them to atypical materials, industrial offcuts, worn-out shoes, and so on. And this combination between classical production method applied to waste streams, creates a kind of a hybrid aesthetic, but develops a shoe that is not designed for one life cycle, but it's designed for and built for repair. So you can see here one of the first prototypes on the sole. You see a modular shoe system that it clicks on top of the on top of the shoe, so it facilitates the repairing process once the shoe is worn out. So that idea to design for repair instead of design for recycling is really important, and was something that we want to continue to emphasize, but also test in a real life context. So the next step into this case study was to develop to apply the principles of custom territory, retake, remake, reuse onto the city of Antwerp. So this city, and the first step into making that idea real was looking for locally available people, actors, expertise, infrastructure that could help us in setting up a small production system. So this map shows some of the partners that we involved in the process and some of the materials that we source locally. So these are all materials, actors, organizations that exist within the city center of Antwerp, and these were the constrictions of our design process, but also challenged us to come up with alternative production ways. But one of the biggest advantages of focusing on designing in a local context was that we could blur the boundaries between designing, making, and wearing. So we chose to really involve the people that who take on the role of the wearer or the consumer, and give them, let's say, a title of co-designer, and involve them into our design and making process. So we invited 3 local ambassadors. Geoffrey, Liesel, and Frederick. Geoffrey is a dancer. Liesel is really active in the resale market. Frey is a street artist. So 3 people, 3 wearers who represent a unique perspective on the city of Antwerp. We involved into our design and making process. That was quite organized, quite literally. You could see here. We set up a working space in a temporary club at Onderstroom here in Antwerp. We involved local shoemakers on the Govaerts into the design and making process. And here it became really clear that these roles between the designing, making, and wearing started to blur, and also created a result that is quite different than a traditional design process. So this final product, let's say that we designed for Geoffrey, is different than this product that we designed for Liesel, of course, because of the different perspectives that were involved into the process. So it's a really participatory design approach. And what we noticed that was quite different than from let's say, how shoes are designed and made right now. So this small scale represents a lot of different challenges, but also creates a lot of new opportunities to set up new connections between these different actors in the design and the making process. We organized a public event, a guided tour in the middle of Corona. We used the displays of local retailers to showcase the final products to the public. This is one that we did at Vrijdagmarkt 6, not that far from here. And what we actually want to do with this is, first of all, to prove that a small-scale production system for shoes is possible, to make a contrast with how the industry is organized today. This is not a feasible or a viable business model yet. But the next step into this process is to examine how the role of the shoemaker can be reimagined. And that was a really important conclusion into this case study, is that the shoemaker as a craft is really being pushed outside of the market into this global system. There's no room for shoemaking and repairing anymore. Shoes are just replaced with new ones once they are worn out. And so this became really clear that the role of the shoemaker needs to be reimagined. And that is the, let's say, next step into our research process, to reimagine the space as a place where design, production, and wearing can be closed. We'd already set up an experiment that I can't show you right now in the video, but so the shoemaker as a place where design, production, and consumption can meet is for us the next frontier into making this idea of a shoe industry a lot more transparent, and to breaking down these barriers between design, production, and using. Our dream is to develop a decentralized network of shoemakers, designers, and wearers to set up in different cities around, let's say, Europe, custom territory network. So if you have any ideas of suggestions on how to do this, we're currently involved in preparing a European funding project to set up and to try to make this happen. So if you have interest in that, please contact me afterwards.
Thank you very much. I will invite Veerle and Soraya on stage as well. Yeah, we can take place here. I think there is a walking microphone in the back also for questions. Yeah, perfect. First of all, thank you very much for your presentations. Is there already a first question from the audience? They are very quiet. Not yet? Okay. I have some questions. And then if you think of more questions, please say so. And I will get back to you soon. So in the last panel as well, in the opening panel today, we've heard a lot about there needs to be a new logic within fashion where the planet is put first. We also have heard, or for example, in Soraya's presentation, we've seen a lot of troubles in the industry. But my question to you all is, what makes you optimistic about this industry? What makes you drive? What makes you want to continue?
Well, I think although we're a small country, only Belgium, and Flanders is really small, I see a lot of movement in the circular fashion or in the movement towards the circular fashion industry. I work in the fashion industry for some years now, doing research or case studies or whatever. And I see the willingness to change grow very much. We have set up the Close the Loop program together with Flanders DC. The amount of companies that are following that trajectory is growing. There is a lot of willingness to change, but a lot of confusion how to. So the SMEs, I'm hopeful. And I think Flanders is also a place where a lot of case studies are popping up and doing great things. You have these two, but in the past you had Martijn van Strien, you had the Yuma Labs with the recycled glasses. So a lot of case studies of startups, young people who want to show the industry that things can be done differently. So these two adding up makes me hopeful that change is ahead.
I think there's a huge sense of urgency right now. You can see that on various levels, on policy levels, the European Green Deal, things like the European Bauhaus are introduced. So there's a lot of urgency and understanding on different levels that that this needs to happen. And I think for designers especially, this represents the biggest opportunity in a lifetime, because the urgency is there. There are a lot of companies that are willing to go into that direction. Maybe they don't know how or how to approach it. So for a lot of designers, business developers, and let's say creative industry in general, it's the biggest opportunity to set this transformation into motion. I think I agree. I think with Soraya that we need inspiring examples. But I try to, especially toward my students, I try to frame it as a huge opportunity, not as a gigantic tornado that is coming our way.
I can indeed add that there is a huge demand and that there are a lot of questions, and these questions can be filled in by pioneering, by sharing knowledge, by education. And I am positive and hopeful because when I started, it was for me a very private playground. Let's try. And now with progressing, I just know and feel that opportunities are popping up everywhere. So it's indeed a very good thing to encourage young people and who will become designers and entrepreneurs, and at the other side, the SMEs to change. And I think what will be very important is the communication between these groups. We have the young, inspired, smart students or artists or whatever, and then you have these big, gigantic fashion factories or companies with this, who can feel the urge and who can feel the demands or the necessity. And I think a next very important step is to have them together in one room.
Thank you. I think a couple of things that have been said links to your research. I think in the industry, we all know and feel the need to change. And we think that that's the same on the consumer side as well. We think because we know everything that's going on, consumers must know as well. But I think I saw from your slides that's not exactly the case. Can you tell us a bit more about your results and how that links to what was said here?
Well, what we see is that consumers, it's difficult to talk in general, but I will for the sake of discussion. Consumers are a bit behind on what we expected. What we see mostly in the circular fashion industry, or the questions we asked, is the most difficult is changing behavior. It's not knowing things or being aware of things. That's the first step, of course. And I think we are getting there for some groups already. But changing behavior is a whole different level. When we need them to participate in resale, that's easy because it's online. They have their phone in their hand, and just by 2 clicks, you have a new piece. So we see that model quite easily kicking off. Instead of renting, when you ask people to go to one specific place, you have to find your piece, you have to rent, you have to take out, bring it back. It's like they can't seem to grasp. It seems a hassle, and it's a whole different set of actions that you're asked to do. So this behavior is quite an issue. What we can conclude is that make it as easy as possible. It's always follow the path of the least resistance. People will always do that when they have a lack of time or money. Make it as easy as possible, and make it look like it's always been there. So behavior is the second one. We're hopefully going to deep dive in this behavior, because now stated, yes, it's going up, but the real behavior is quite slower. But what I think personally is that they're looking very much at companies to make the change, not so much the government, because maybe we think less about government, what's a possibility they can do, but there is indeed a lot going on the European level. But companies have to make the change. And when I think that consumers will follow that, when all clothing is sustainable, they just will buy it. They accept that it's a little more in cost. It's like taking away the plastic bag in the supermarket. Just make it available. And I think that's what they want, not for them to change as much, but to change and offer it and make it easy.
Do you have a reaction to that? I saw you popping up your hand.
Two things. When I'm designing collection, I aim to not have it. Yes, I tell the story of where this item is coming from, and I don't hide the materials I use. But at the same time, you only see this at the second side, or when you're interested. Is not my goal to design a collection that looks like it is circular. And for the shoes, the same thing. You just want to make an appealing shoe, because people don't buy clothing because it's sustainable. They buy clothing because they like the piece. And so that's one thing that if you have a very nice sustainable product, nice is more important, and then you don't have to make the behavioral change because you still are buying the nicest piece. So this is a very good encouragement for me to make the nicest clothes. And then next to that, we still are because of the government, what you said, we are taxed more on working hours and not on materials. If we would have been taxed by how much material we use or discard and less on working hours, then value would be changed. Now it is so much cheaper and therefore easier and sadly smarter to just get rid of tons and tons of perfectly usable textiles, because these textiles in the garbage bins, they need sorting and they need tender love and care to see the value in them. And because it's more expensive, it's not a logic thing to do. And that's why it's not happening. So that's why changing how taxes are directed even can make a huge change. And then those SMEs will have to follow.
What would a shift in taxes mean for the future of custom territory?
A shift in taxes. I don't know that this will help to facilitate change maybe a little bit, but what I'm really convinced about what can facilitate change is that I think circularity needs to become a fundamental aspect. Maybe taxes can be regulated that towards companies should be like regulatory, that you organize your business model in a circular way. And to convince the wearers, I think you really need to seduce them to become part of this circular system. They don't need to be just convinced; they need to be seduced. So this, if a circular fashion system will be the future, then this future needs to become desirable, something to want, something to claim for. And I think this is a huge opportunity also in the design and the creative field, especially, and also in fashion. I think I'm a little bit of outside perspective of fashion itself, but I see in the fashion industry there is a lot of super creative art direction and so on, but that just follows the system. But that energy could also be used to seduce people into an alternative system.
Thank you. Can I already seduce some people from the audience for a question? I see 2 hands. Perfect. 3. Yes. 4 hands. First in the back.
Hello. Is it on? Yeah. Yeah, my question's for Ben, actually, and leads on quite nicely from what you said. A lot of your work is, or the original work that you did deconstructing trainers and then mixing them with a shoemaker's last, if you like, or a sort of traditional shoe, was reminiscent of Helen Kirkham's work and her MA work, obviously, at the Royal College. And I suppose that led me to think it's really interesting that more collaborative aspect that you take with wearers and people to develop a shoe a shoe based on that same sort of methodology, but broadening it all out. But what I did wonder from your images is that obviously you grow their skills, and so you help them processing and developing their skills. But do you actually work with them in terms of research and in terms of more of a criticality towards design?
You mean involving the wearer into
Yeah.
the complete research process?
Well, at least, it looked like you're involving them in the actual making, the development of skills and making process.
In the case study of Custom Territory Antwerp, we involved them throughout several stages of the design process, and quite early on into, let's say, the super conceptual phase. It was started out with just getting to know one another and to have this kind of knowledge exchange to so break down these boundaries and not frame people as experts, but to have this space, create a space where this knowledge exchange can happen was a super important first step. So also organizing that into a physical space was super challenging, especially with the COVID crisis. But that was really important to have this collaborative space where this interaction can happen. I think that's really important. And I think that's also what lacks into this global context is that the distance is spread out across the globe. And designers in design studios that work for big brands don't necessarily don't know for who will make the shoes or who will design or who will use the shoes, and that distance generates also a little bit of disconnect, I believe, and that's from all the things that we took away from that project is that breaking down those boundaries can help to create a new appreciation for the products to become part of the process and not just as a passive consumer, but as an active co-designer.
Yeah, I suppose I asked the question because the original makes that you had up there that you did as more of a collective yourselves was quite different to when that went to the wearers, because then those silhouettes and designs were recognisable. And I suppose it's how do you resist the wearer's designs being more commonplace, if you like, and sort of recognisable, and urging, therefore, what you might call creativity or innovation in design.
Yeah. So in this process, the wearer has a bigger voice. It's a participatory design process. However, of course, that doesn't mean that the professional designer doesn't have any responsibility anymore. The professional designer that is part of that team needs to still make decisions in how to translate some of these, let's say, inspirational ideas that are given by the wearers and then translate them into a final product, or in this case, proof of concept prototype. But there's not a formula for that. This is a balancing exercise, and I think that also has to depend on the talent of the designer to mediate that kind of process. But the design process is something to also practice and to become aware of, I think.
It almost sounds like designers need an extra skill or a new skill to mediate between the wearer and their process. Let's see, there were 3 more questions. Yeah, in the front. Thank you.
Thank you so much for presentations. So it really resonates, obviously, when we talk about fashion being about, from the consumer standpoint, being we have to speak about desire. We have to speak about something that is easy for the consumer to kind of understand sustainability in that context. And I get that. And also around this piece of seduction that you're speaking about. But I was wondering, as you're talking about changing behavior, I think I don't want us to cop out on that, because I mean, there's a theme that's coming through, like who's the person that's responsible for educating the consumer, that came at us yesterday in our panel. And it's sort of a theme that's coming back, that the consumer is the critical missing link in all of this. We're here, we care so much. So, educators care, the new generation are aware of all these changes we need to make. And it seems the consumer is the one that's not aware of those changes, and they hold the most power to make the change by making different choices. So I was wondering about the role of empathy in that process and changing behavior. Because when you think about retail therapies coming to my mind, so, we see something, we have this desire for that piece, and we buy it, and it makes us feel amazing. It adds to our life. There's an emotional connectivity to that piece that you're buying. So can we leverage that emotion then? We talked about trouble in this morning's. I mean, we have to embrace the trouble. So we have to also kind of lead the consumer to embracing the trouble as well with us. I mean, not just saying, okay, let's get it, like flood the market with sustainability so that they don't even sort of know, and they buy it anyway because of the desirability. But the empathy for me, I think, is important, so that we can, if we have them understand. I'm thinking of the movie True Cost, right? I know that people in my life are outside of fashion, like specific industry / space, who are just consumers. If they I've seen them watch that, and it's compelling to them. Obviously, they walk away, and then an hour later, a day later, it starts to disappear. That's human nature. But there's something compelling about that, getting those stories in front, getting the consequences of their buying decisions in front of them. Do you think that will change? How can we do that better? What's the role of empathy? Do you think that's a powerful tool in making that behavioral change in the consumer?
I'm impressed by the depth of your question. It's really difficult to answer. But from my point of view of our research, it's that empathy is a driver, but for the most, it's not the driver. You see, for the younger generation, I was quite pessimistic maybe in showing the result, but you have this 1/4 percentage is not aware at all, but you have 1 in 4 who is very aware. So you have this generation that is so in a spread stand, but it's also a generation that has grown up in time of crisis. They have experienced financial bank crisis. They know that houses are difficult to buy. Energy prices are going up. So they're the crisis generation. So they're becoming these micro entrepreneurs who are reselling their clothes online to get their bucks back. So for them, empathy could work, but price could even tickle them more. So that's really important to understand. When you look at millennials, they're more relaxed on the pricing. When you go older, it's even more relaxed. They're like, price doesn't matter. Show me, convince me. That's why I call it the lost potential generation. But they're kind of missed out in our talks because we don't reach them through social media. We reach them in store. They go to their fixed stores. If you tell them there, empathy could work. I'm really convinced. But it's not that empathy could work for everybody and win over the other impulses that are playing a key role.
I'd like to maybe add something to your answer on your question about empathy and fashion. When I started, it was for me Studio Ama Labo for ethical fashion. I wanted to be very specific on the for, because I am not energized by bashing on how this industry works. I wanted to emphasize the possibilities and the the transparency, showing people where clothes are made or how they are made, even having open ateliers, showing as much as possible, making them part of the process. Even telling this fabrics is coming from that city. Oh, but I have an aunt living there. Like all these small stories, these connections that we make, is also how we will approach clothing. And empathy, yes, but then by being honest and communicating, I think we can raise the awareness on the other side, like that it's more preferable to have this item and maybe only choose one, instead of, I don't know where this comes from, but it maybe looks nice for a month or 2 evenings, and then you have to buy 5 of them. So it is also looking at what is possible instead of bashing what is, for me. And also the tailors age, where we had clothes fitted on our, and what we could also pick the textiles and so on. There we altered pieces, we took care of them, we knew how to use our washing machine, and that's not that far behind. So that's also something that I'm rather hopeful of. We are making this movement, and then I hope we are going down from the tipping point on in how we consume, and going for better, and to choose better items and to need less of them.
Thank you. Do we have a question from the online audience? Yes. Let's first go online audience, and then you have the last question. Yeah?
Yes. So the online audience has posted several questions, and I will pick 2, and maybe you can choose on which you would like to reply. So Robert asks, from yesterday discussion, there was a clear distinction between the art of fashion education and the design fashion education. How do these creative match or not this previous discussion? And the second question is from Lisa. How can we bridge the paradigm gaps regarding sustainability between the different generations, so that we can learn from each other from regarding the way forward?
All right, so the first one was the difference between fashion and design education. Maybe that's something for you, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's interesting for me. My background is in design education. I come from a design context, and I have to say, in the design context, I'm used to working in a participatory way. And with this project, we kind of emerged onto the field of fashion, and then we noticed that this participatory way of working, a little of what we call a social design approach, is not that common in the fashion industry, which was something that was actually striking for me. I think, especially in in the bigger academia here in Antwerp, something like that is not common practice. I've learned to know, don't want to point out with a finger, but I've learned that it's not common practice. Well, I think, wow, that's strange, because this is, as I said before, a super interesting opportunity. And I think what really needs to happen is that super creative energy that happens over there, that needs to also be applied to this, let's say, alternative fashion system. But from my point of view, it seems to be that it really now really exists. There's a lot of, let's say, classical fashion education that is part of the system, that is super powerful and super creative, but it works within the system. And I think that energy also needs to be applied outside of the system, or creates their own systems.
Yeah, I'm afraid I didn't grasp the question very much. Um, well, to bridge the gap between generation, that's kind of the question, maybe. Well, I'm not sure how to. It's not a how to model or anything, but we're next up is that we are going to cluster more across the bridges of the generations. I presented this because it's the first and more visible result that we had. But we're going to cluster because you have total green generation Z and not aware generation X people who are have to be addressed in the same way more than people who are in the same generation. But what we are trying to do is cluster and categorize to help startups and SMEs to find their language to communicate in the right way with their consumers. Because sometimes you can want as a designer talk about empathy or anything else, but if your consumer doesn't respond to it, it's sort of regrettable. So we want to help, not to manipulate consumers, but to make this barrier between the maker and the consumers go more fluently.
So actually, it's already past 1, but because we started late, I would like to have one more question. I hope that's okay for you in the audience, because I think you are ready.
Okay, thank you. I will be quick. My question is also about consumer behavior. That sorry, I'm not really agree that only make something look good that will be enough to change in consumer behavior, because we must not forget that being able to buy sustainable product is a privilege, and but especially when we look at Gen Z, they are very price driven. But that's interesting. Look at maybe they are actually not very poor. They have the money. They are very driven by this constantly new and seasonal thinking. So I wonder, but they are not aware of that, especially have very short, like focus, spending time to focus on things. And if you're showing them telling them to research, give them lots of information, they cannot concentrate. So I think it's important as a fashion who understand what's going on in design, and we need to respond to this, being able to change their behavior. And then we cannot just say we focus on the more possibility of the other generation, because they are the young generation, they are the future to come. So I think it's important we respond. So I wonder how, as a designer or researcher, you can respond to this kind of way of thinking about constantly pursuing new and seasonal thinking.
It's a very beautiful question, and you're absolutely right. Being for a lot of times, sustainable products are more expensive, and yes, it is a privilege to be able to buy them. On the other hand, I see a lot of youngsters buying secondhand, and that's an amazing thing. But it's also something that I'm aware of, and I'm searching on how to respond to that as a designer. And very specifically, in the design itself, I try to design pieces that you can wear in different ways to adapt it on different moods or circumstances. So that's one way to approach it. On the other level, I also see clients of mine that are saving up to be able to buy a piece. So that's very beautiful as well. So there's a certain group that is interested in having a smaller closet and not being seduced to having different outfits every month or so. So now we're talking youngsters, and then if we're talking about the generation we maybe don't approach enough, there I think it is very important. it was mentioned before, the experience of buying is an important one. How fashion can make you feel, the circumstances of buying, and I am not. If you don't want to hear the story behind the clothes of the collection, you don't need to. If you just think a piece is appealing enough to be in your wardrobe, that's the best compliment. And that it is sustainable should stay an extra, because I think if sustainability in how I communicate is the front runner, then I would get sloppy on the clothes themselves. And I want to create an alternative business model in the fashion industry. So the least I have to do is being able to stand next to a regular fashion brand. And if the regular fashion brand next to mine has better quality or better aesthetics, then the sustainability thing has no value, because I won't have a sustainable business model in terms of turnover. So this is juggling, but super interesting, and I hope this could have been an answer to your question.
Thank you, Soraya, and thank you for the questions all. I think we have to finish this panel. We're a bit over time. Thank you all for joining. Thank you very much for presenting your paper. I think the paper will be available on the webpage after the Responsible Fashion series. So look them up if you're interested. And also, some of them reached out to you. If you're interested, email them, give them a follow, and enjoy lunch, I guess. Thank you.